My dear child, the punishment you have been bracing for was cancelled this morning because someone walked into the place of payment before you woke up and settled the entire debt without asking your permission. Do not scroll past this. What I am about to tell you will dismantle something you have been carrying so long it has become indistinguishable from your identity. The guilt, the quiet internal conviction that what has been going wrong in your life is what you earned. The bracing, the constant exhausting, never-ending bracing for a consequence that you believe is still making its way toward you because of something you did that you have never fully forgiven yourself for. The consequence is not coming. The debt is paid. You have been waking up every morning expecting collectors at your door. Not literal collectors, the spiritual kind. The kind that arrive as bad news, as closed doors, as blessings that approach, and then withdraw at the last second because somewhere in the accounting of your life you believe there is a balance owed that must be collected before anything good is permanently yours. But the collectors were dismissed. Before they ever reached your door, a guarantor stepped in. Someone whose authority to pay exceeded your authority to owe. Someone who walked into the place of payment carrying a currency your debt could not refuse, and settled the full amount. Not a partial payment, not an installment plan that leaves the remaining balance hanging over your head. The full amount, paid, stamped, cancelled, filed under debts resolved before the debtor even knew the transaction occurred. You did not know this happened. That is why you are still bracing. Stay here. What I reveal next is who the guarantor was, what the debt actually consisted of, and why you have been living as a free person who still carries the posture of someone in chains. Type settled if you have been quietly bracing for a punishment you believed you deserved. And God just told you the debt was paid by someone who stepped in before the collectors ever reached your door. Before we go any further, I need to tell you something that genuinely surprised me. A neuroscientist discovered a simple 7-second technique that actually rewires how your brain processes thoughts. And when I tried it, the difference was almost unsettling. My focus sharpened, ideas started connecting faster, and that mental fog gone. This isn't manifestation nonsense. It's backed by real brain science, and thousands of people are already seeing results. But here's the catch. Only 5 spots are left. If something inside you is saying, try it, trust that instinct. Click the link in the description or pinned comment before it's too late. The guarantor did not pay a portion of what you owed. He paid the amount that was calculated against the full record of everything you have been holding against yourself, my beloved child. I need you to understand the scale of what was settled. Your guilt has not been carrying a single debt. It has been carrying a ledger, an internal accounting system that has been recording every failure, every wrong decision, every moment you chose what you knew was wrong, every person you hurt, every promise you broke, every time you fell short of who you know you were supposed to be. And the total on that ledger is the number the guarantor settled. Not the small number, the real number. The one you are afraid to calculate, because calculating it would confirm what you already believe, that the debt is too large for mercy to cover. The guarantor looked at the full number, and he paid it without flinching. This message was not sent to someone carrying casual guilt. This was aimed at the one person whose private ledger carries a balance so heavy and so specific that the idea of full cancellation feels not just unlikely, but offensive. Because you know what you did. You know the details. You know the names of the people affected. You know the moments that cannot be undone. And the suggestion that someone could walk into the place of payment and settle all of it. Every entry, every line item, every shameful detail feels too generous for a record as detailed as yours. My child, the generosity is not proportional to your record. It is proportional to the guarantor's resources, and the guarantor's resources are unlimited. You have been measuring the possibility of your cancellation against the size of your debt. But cancellation is not measured against the debt. It is measured against the one who pays. And the one who paid yours operates in a currency that your debt, no matter how large, could never exhaust. What I reveal next is when the payment was made, and why you were not told until now. Type full amount if you have been carrying a private ledger of guilt so detailed and so heavy that the idea of complete cancellation feels impossible. And something inside you just cracked hearing that the guarantor paid the real number without flinching. I have been watching you live under a debt that was already paid, my dear one, and the distance between what you believe you owe and what has actually been settled is the most heartbreaking gap I have ever observed in your life. Not because you are stubborn, not because you refuse grace intellectually. You would affirm grace in a conversation. You would teach it to someone else. You would hold it out for any other person whose record looked exactly like yours, and insist that they are forgiven and free, and no longer defined by what they did. You would mean every word, and then you would walk home and resume living under the weight of your own unpaid ledger. The gap between the grace you extend to others and the grace you withhold from yourself is where I have been watching you suffer in silence for longer than you want to admit. My beloved child, I watched you last month when someone offered you a compliment about your character, and something inside you physically recoiled. Not visibly, internally. A quiet flinch that said they would not say that if they knew. The compliment bounced off a surface that has been hardened by self-condemnation so long that kindness aimed at your identity cannot penetrate the barrier your guilt constructed. You deflect what you believe you do not deserve, and you believe you deserve nothing good. I have been studying the architecture of your guilt with the precision of someone who knows which bricks were placed by genuine conviction and which ones were placed by an enemy, who discovered that the fastest way to keep you from receiving what the guarantor paid for is to convince you the payment was never made. Your guilt has two sources, and only one of them is honest. The honest guilt served its purpose. It brought you to repentance. The dishonest guilt has been serving the enemy's purpose, keeping you in a prison whose door was unlocked by a payment you were never informed of. What I show you next is the exact moment the guarantor made the payment, and why you were intentionally not told until this specific day. Type 2 sources if you just realized that part of the guilt you carry is genuine conviction that has already been answered, and part of it is a lie designed to keep you living under a debt that was already paid in full. I know the specific thing you did that you believe disqualified you from mercy, my beloved child. You have never spoken it in full to another person. You have referenced it indirectly. You have alluded to it in conversations that skirted the edge of confession without ever crossing into the territory of full disclosure. Because full disclosure would require you to say the words out loud. And saying them out loud would make the thing so real that the last thin layer of distance between you and the full weight of what you did would dissolve. So you carry it in edited form, and the edited form is heavy enough to destroy you. I know the unedited version. I know the details your mouth has never produced. I know the decision that was made in the moment, the specific second where you chose what you knew was wrong and felt the internal mechanism that separates before from after click into a position it has never returned from. You remember that click, the sensation of crossing a line that cannot be uncrossed, the specific, irreversible awareness that what just happened cannot be taken back, and the person standing on this side of the decision is permanently different from the person who stood on the other side. That click has been echoing inside you ever since. And the echo is what you call guilt. My child, I saw the moment it happened, not from a courtroom bench, not from a judge's position, calculating the sentence that fits the crime, from the position of a father who watched his child walk into traffic, unable to stop the choice without overriding the will, unwilling to override the will because love does not function through force, and who began moving toward the place of payment the instant the decision was made. The guarantor did not wait for you to ask. He moved the moment you fell. The thing you did, the specific, unedited, fully detailed thing, was absorbed into the guarantor's payment before the guilt had time to finish forming in your chest. The payment was not a response to your repentance. It was a response to your fall, and the response was faster than the fall itself. The cruelest part of carrying this guilt is that it taught you to punish yourself in ways no one else can see, my dear child. You do not call it punishment. You call it caution, restraint, keeping your expectations realistic. But I know what it actually is. A self-imposed sentencing system that operates beneath your conscious awareness and has been extracting payment from you in daily installments ever since the debt was recorded on your private ledger. You have been serving a sentence that was already cancelled, and you have been the judge, the jury, and the executioner. I watched the way you sabotage good things when they approach you, not dramatically, subtly. A qualified opportunity arrives, and something inside you hesitates, not from wisdom, but from a deep conviction that accepting something good would violate the terms of a punishment you believe you are still serving. A relationship moves toward you with genuine warmth, and your internal system deflects it, not because you do not want it, but because the guilty do not deserve warmth, and you still classify yourself as guilty. You have been rejecting blessings as part of your sentence, and no one told you the sentence was already served. My beloved child, I watched the night you almost forgave yourself. You were close. Something in the atmosphere shifted. A conversation, a moment of clarity, a flash of grace that almost penetrated the barrier your guilt constructed. For a few seconds, the weight lifted. The ledger loosened its grip, and a version of you that existed before the fall almost surfaced through the layers of self-condemnation. Then the memory returned. The click echoed, and you pushed yourself back under the weight, because the brief moment of lightness felt like a violation of a sentence you believed was still in effect. You punished yourself for almost forgiving yourself. And that is the moment I decided this message could not wait one more day. The collectors were dismissed. The sentence was served by another. The prisoner has been living in a cell whose door has been open since before the sentencing began. Type open cell if you have been punishing yourself through subtle self-sabotage, rejecting blessings, deflecting good things, keeping your expectations low, because you believed you were still serving a sentence that the guarantor already completed on your behalf. The guilt you carried was never the payment, my beloved one. It was the echo of a debt that was settled before the echo began. I need to dismantle the theology your pain has been constructing inside you. Your internal system built a doctrine that says guilt is the currency of penance, that carrying the weight is how you pay, that the heaviness on your chest every morning is a spiritual installment being extracted from your account toward a balance that slowly, painfully, over years, might eventually be reduced to zero if you suffer enough. That doctrine was never mine, and it has been robbing you of what the guarantor already purchased. Guilt is not payment. Guilt is the alarm that alerts a person that a debt exists. The alarm serves its purpose the moment the debtor becomes aware of the obligation. After awareness is established, the alarm is supposed to stop, because the function of the alarm was notification, not payment. An alarm that continues ringing after the notification has been received is not serving the debtor. It is torturing them. My child, your alarm has been ringing for years after the notification was delivered and received and acted upon. You were notified. You felt the conviction. You carried the awareness. You brought the debt to the only place a spiritual debt can be settled. And the guarantor stepped in and paid the full amount in a transaction that required nothing from you except the willingness to acknowledge that the debt existed. You provided the acknowledgement. The guarantor provided the payment. The transaction is complete. But the alarm is still ringing. And the reason the alarm continued is because no one told you the payment was made. You acknowledged the debt. You felt the full weight of it. And then you waited for the collectors, bracing, preparing, living in the posture of someone expecting consequences. Without receiving the notice that a guarantor had already settled the account and the collectors had been permanently dismissed. The notice is this message, and the notice says, paid in full, balance zero, collectors recalled. Something is shifting inside the accounting system of your life right now, my dear child, and the shift began before you pressed play on this message. Within the last few days, you experienced a moment that did not fit the pattern of your guilt. A moment where something good happened and your internal system, the one that normally intercepts good things with the qualifier "you do not deserve this," hesitated. Not a long hesitation, a fraction of a second, where the rejection reflex paused, as though the mechanism that has been blocking blessings encountered a document it did not know how to process. That document was the notice of cancellation reaching your internal system for the first time. The guarantor's payment has been registered in heaven's ledger since the moment it was made, but the notice of cancellation has been traveling through the layers of your spiritual system, moving past your theology, past your conscious beliefs, past the intellectual awareness that grace exists, down toward the operating system, where the guilt actually lives, and where the self-punishment is actually executed. The notice has reached the operating system, and the operating system is beginning to update. My beloved child, I have been engineering this delivery behind the layers of your awareness. While you were living under the weight of an unpaid debt, I was routing the cancellation notice through channels that bypass your mind's tendency to intercept and reinterpret grace before it reaches the part of you that needs it most. Your mind knows about grace. Your operating system does not. And the notice was always meant for the operating system. The hesitation you felt, that fraction of a second where the rejection reflex paused, that was the first evidence that the cancellation is being processed at a level deeper than your theology has ever reached. The update is in progress. And what I reveal next is what your life looks like when the operating system finishes processing the notice that the debt is zero and the collectors are gone. Type updating if you experienced a recent moment where something good happened and your internal rejection system hesitated for the first time, and you now believe that was the cancellation notice, reaching a part of you that guilt had been governing for years. Heaven just cancelled the punishment meant for you, and the reason this title carries the weight it carries is because the punishment was real and the cancellation was costly. My beloved child, I need to be honest with you about something your guilt has actually been correct about. The debt was real. The consequences were real. What you did carried a weight that the spiritual accounting system registered as a genuine obligation requiring genuine payment. Your guilt was not manufacturing a debt that did not exist. It was detecting a debt that did exist, accurately, precisely, with a detailed awareness that only a person who committed the act could carry. Your guilt was right about the debt. It was wrong about who was responsible for paying it. The punishment that was calculated against your specific record was not small, my child. I will not diminish it by pretending the debt was minor. What you did carried consequences that the spiritual system had already computed and assigned to your account. The collectors were dispatched. The payment was scheduled. The consequence was in motion, traveling toward your life on a timeline that would have arrived and extracted exactly what the ledger demanded. And then the guarantor intercepted it. Not after you earned the intervention. Not after you demonstrated sufficient repentance. Not after you served enough of the sentence to qualify for early release. Before any of that, the guarantor stepped into the payment office carrying a currency so far above the denomination of your debt that the system did not just cancel the specific obligation. It closed the account entirely. Not reduce the balance. Close the account. Because a guarantor operating at that level of resource does not negotiate partial settlements. He paid full price for a debt he did not create, for a debtor who did not ask. Before the debtor knew, the collectors had been dispatched. And the reason you were not told until now is because the payment needed to reach the system before the notice could reach you. The system has been updated. The account is closed. Now I can tell you. And what I reveal next is who the guarantor is. The guarantor who paid your debt is standing closer to you right now than the guilt that has been sitting on your chest for years, my dear one. I need you to prepare for what you are about to hear. Not intellectually. You already know the theology. You have heard the concept. You have spoken the words in worship and repeated them in prayer and affirmed them in conversations with others who needed the truth you could not seem to apply to yourself. What is about to happen is not a transfer of information. It is the moment the information drops from your head to your chest, from the theological register where it has been stored as knowledge to the operating system where it has been blocked from functioning as reality. The drop is happening right now, and it will feel like nothing you have experienced before. The guarantor is not anonymous, my beloved child. He is not a faceless spiritual entity who processed the transactions from a distance. He walked into the place of payment personally. He presented himself as the payer. He offered his own resources, not a delegated fund, not an institutional reserve, not a charitable donation processed through a system, his own body as the currency that your debt required. The payment was not financial, it was physical. The debt you owe is not the kind that money settles, and the guarantor who paid it did not do so because the system required him to. He did it because he looked at the full ledger, every entry, every line item, every shameful detail you have been hiding in the private room of your guilt, and he decided that the person who owed this debt was worth more to him than the cost of settling it. My child, the guarantor calculated your worth against the price of your debt, and your worth won. The next thing I speak is the moment of cancellation, the instant the payment made contact with your account, and the balance that has been governing your self-punishment dropped to zero. Type worth more if something just dropped from your head to your chest. And for the first time, the truth that someone paid your debt is not just something you know, but something you are beginning to feel in the place where the guilt has been living. The payment just made contact with your account. Balance reads zero, and the collectors that have been haunting your expectations have been permanently dismissed. My beloved child, this is the moment, the ledger you have been carrying, the one with every entry, every failure, every decision you cannot take back, every person you hurt, every moment you crossed the line you swore you would never cross. That ledger just received a stamp across every page that reads paid in full by guarantor. Not reduced, not partially settled, not pending review, paid completely, irreversibly, in a currency that your debt had no authority to refuse. Heaven just cancelled the punishment meant for you. Someone took it in your place. I need you to feel what is happening inside your chest right now. The weight that has been sitting there, the specific, named, constantly present weight of a person who believes they are awaiting consequences they earned. That weight is encountering the cancellation notice for the first time at the depth where the weight actually lives. Not in your theology, not in your intellectual understanding of grace, in the operating system, in the place where the guilt has been executing its daily extraction of joy and peace and self-worth from a person who believed they owed more than they could ever repay. The operating system just processed the notice, and the weight is responding. Can you feel it shifting? Not disappearing entirely, not yet, but moving, loosening, the way a physical weight shifts when the surface it has been resting on is tilted for the first time. The weight does not know where to go because it has been stationary for so long that movement itself feels foreign. That movement is the beginning of freedom, my child. The guarantor who settled your debt did not pay the price so that you would carry the weight for one more day. He paid it so that the moment the notice reached the operating system, the weight would lose its legal right to remain on your chest. The notice has arrived. The legal right has been revoked. The weight no longer has permission to stay. And what you are feeling right now is the first moment it begins to obey. The cancellation is not just removing the debt. It is dismantling the entire system your guilt built to keep you paying, my dear child. When a debt is cancelled, the balance goes to zero. But when a guarantor of this magnitude settles an account, the cancellation does not stop at the ledger. It reaches into every system the debt created, every mechanism, every habit, every reflexive pattern that was constructed to service an obligation that no longer exists. And your guilt built an extensive system. The system is being dismantled. In real time, right now. The self-punishment mechanism, the one that sabotaged good things before you could receive them, because receiving good things violated the terms of a sentence you believed you were still serving, that mechanism just lost its authorization. It was operating under the legal framework of an active debt. The debt is cancelled. The framework is void. And a mechanism that operates without legal authorization loses its power over the system it was installed in. My beloved child, the sabotage is ending. Not because you decided to stop sabotaging, because the legal basis for the sabotage has been removed. The deflection reflex, the one that bounced compliments and kindness and recognition off a surface hardened by self-condemnation, that reflex was funded by the same legal framework. Active debt produces active deflection. Cancelled debt produces a surface that can finally receive what has been bouncing off it for years. You are about to receive what you have been deflecting, and the volume of what has been accumulating on the other side of the deflection barrier will overwhelm you when it finally makes contact. The blessing rejection pattern, the instinct that distrusted every good thing is temporary, because somewhere in your accounting the punishment was still pending. That pattern just lost its source code. Pending punishment produces preemptive rejection. Cancelled punishment produces the capacity to hold good things without waiting for them to be confiscated. Every system the guilt built is losing power, and what replaces each dismantled system is a capacity you forgot you possessed, the capacity to receive without flinching. Type dismantled if you can feel the systems your guilt constructed beginning to lose power, the sabotage weakening, the deflection softening, the rejection pattern releasing its grip, because the legal basis for all of it was just permanently removed. Let me show you what your life looks like when every system the guilt built has been fully dismantled and the operating system is running on a balance of zero, my dear one. The first thing that changes is how you receive your own mornings. You have been waking up braced. Every day began with the same unconscious posture, shoulders tightened, chest guarded, spirit scanning the horizon for the consequence that must surely be approaching, because the ledger still showed a balance owed. That posture consumed the first minutes of every day before your conscious mind even engaged with the actual content of the day ahead. The bracing stops when the balance reads 0, and your mornings are about to feel unrecognizable. You will open your eyes and feel something that has been absent for so long you forgot it was ever part of your morning experience. Lightness, not the forced lightness of someone who is performing positivity over a foundation of guilt. The structural lightness of a person whose operating system is no longer running a debt management program in the background of every waking moment. My beloved child, you are about to discover how much energy the guilt was consuming, the capacity that was being spent on self-punishment, the enormous daily expenditure of energy required to maintain the deflection barriers, the sabotage mechanisms, the constant low-level vigilance against receiving something the guilty do not deserve. All of that energy is being returned to your available reserves, and the surplus will stun you. Creativity that was suppressed by the weight of unpaid debt is going to resurface. Dreams that your guilt sentenced to life imprisonment are going to walk out of cells whose doors were opened by the cancellation notice. Ambitions you believed were permanently forfeited because the person you became after the fall did not deserve to pursue them. Those ambitions are being reinstated with full authorization from the guarantor who settled the account. The debt did not just take your peace, it took your future. And the cancellation is returning both. People are going to see something leave your face that they did not know was there until it was gone, my beloved child. The weight of private guilt produces a specific facial signature that others detect without being able to name. A slight guardedness behind the eyes, a tension in the jaw that activates during conversations about worthiness or blessing or receiving. A barely perceptible flinch that fires when someone says something kind about your character. A flinch so brief that casual observers miss it, but close observers have been filing away without understanding its source. That facial signature is dissolving, and the dissolving will be visible before you announce anything. People are going to approach you with a different energy because the frequency you broadcast is changing. A person carrying active debt broadcasts a signal that unconsciously communicates, "Do not get too close. There is something pending here that might affect you if you stand too near." The signal kept people at a distance they could not explain. Connections that should have deepened remained shallow. Intimacy that should have developed stalled, not because people did not want to be close to you, because your guilt frequency was warning them that proximity was unsafe. My child, the frequency just changed from active debt to cleared account. And what approaches a cleared account is fundamentally different from what approaches a pending one. Relationships that were blocked by the guilt signal are going to begin moving toward you with a warmth that feels almost suspicious to a system that has been deflecting warmth for years. Professional opportunities that require clean spiritual credit. Assignments that cannot be released to someone whose operating system is still running a debt management program. Those opportunities just received clearance to approach your life. And the blessings that have been accumulating on the other side of your deflection barrier, the ones that were aimed at you over the past months and years, but bounced off the surface, your guilt hardened. Those blessings have been stored, not lost, stored. And a barrier that just lost its legal authorization can no longer block what has been waiting to land. Type cleared account if you believe that the guilt frequency you have been broadcasting is changing right now. And what has been blocked from approaching your life is about to arrive because the signal has shifted from active debt to paid in full. I need you to understand why the guarantor chose your debt specifically, my beloved child. Because the payment was not a blanket transaction applied generically across all outstanding accounts. The guarantor walked into the place of payment carrying a receipt with one name on it, yours. He did not settle a category of debt. He settled yours. He did not present himself as a payer for humanity in the abstract. He presented himself as a payer for the specific, detailed, line-item ledger that carries the record of your particular failures and your particular choices and your particular moments of falling that no one else on earth experienced in exactly the combination that you did. Your debt was settled personally, by name, by item, by amount. Do you know what it means to be chosen by a guarantor? It means someone looked at the full record, not the edited version you show people, not the theological summary you have processed into manageable language, not the sanitized confession that removes the most damaging details before presenting itself for absolution. The full, unedited, nothing hidden record. And their response to the full record was not rejection. It was payment. My child, the guarantor saw everything and paid anyway. That is the part your guilt cannot process. Because your guilt operates on the assumption that full knowledge of what you did produces full rejection of who you are. It assumes that anyone who saw the complete ledger would conclude the same thing you concluded. This person does not qualify for mercy at this level. And the discovery that someone did see the complete ledger and responded with payment rather than condemnation produces a short circuit in the guilt system, because the system was built on the foundation that full disclosure equals full punishment. Full disclosure met full payment instead. And the system has no category for that. I chose the guarantor for your debt because I chose you before the debt existed. The payment was not a reaction to your fall. It was a provision prepared before the fall occurred, because a God who sees the end from the beginning knew the debt was coming and pre-funded the cancellation before the first entry was ever written. The doubt surfacing right now carries the most convincing disguise it has ever worn. And the disguise is humility, my child. It sounds like this: I do not deserve this. This level of cancellation should go to someone who sinned less deliberately. Someone who fell out of weakness rather than choice. Someone whose ledger does not carry the specific entries mine carries. I know what I did. I know I chose it. I know I could have stopped and did not. And a person who sinned with full awareness does not qualify for the same cancellation as someone who sinned in ignorance. That is not humility. That is pride dressed in self-deprecation. I need you to see the architecture of what that doubt is actually constructing. It is building a hierarchy of sin, ranking your debt as too intentional, too informed, too deliberate to be included in the guarantor's payment. And in doing so, it is claiming something astonishing. It is claiming that your specific debt is larger than the guarantor's specific payment, that what you did exceeds what he paid, that your record contains entries so uniquely terrible that the currency the guarantor offered, though sufficient for others, falls short when applied to yours. My beloved child, that is not humility. That is your guilt claiming to be bigger than grace. And I need to dismantle this with finality. The guarantor's payment was not calculated against a standard debt. It was calculated against the worst possible debt. The maximum. The ceiling of what any human being could accumulate across an entire lifetime of deliberate, informed, fully conscious choosing. The payment was calibrated to exceed that ceiling, which means your ledger, no matter how detailed, no matter how intentional, no matter how many entries carry the weight of a full awareness, sits beneath a payment that was designed to exceed the worst-case scenario. You are not the exception to grace. You are the reason grace was designed to have no exceptions. Type no exceptions if the doubt just tried to convince you that your sins were too deliberate for the guarantor's payment, and you are choosing believe that grace was not designed for the deserving, but for the exact person your guilt told you it could never reach. While you were living under the weight of a debt that was already paid, I was not standing at a distance waiting for you to figure out the balance was zero, my beloved child. I was beside you, inside the weight, present in every morning where the guilt pressed against your chest before your eyes opened, standing in every room where you deflected a blessing because the internal accounting system told you the guilty do not receive. Sitting with you in every silence where the echo of the click replayed and your mind rehearsed the thing you did with the obsessive precision of a person reviewing evidence against themselves. I was in the silence with you, not judging, holding. There were moments during the years of carrying this weight where the guilt became so heavy that your spirit nearly collapsed under it. Not dramatically, the quiet kind of collapse where a person continues functioning externally while something internal bends past the point it was designed to hold. I felt those moments, and in every one of them, I placed my hand beneath the part of you that was bending, not to remove the guilt before the notice could be properly delivered, but to prevent the guilt from breaking what the cancellation was designed to restore. I was protecting what the payment was purchasing, even while you were carrying the cost of not knowing the payment had been made. My child, the years between the payment and the notice were not years of abandonment. They were years of preparation. The notice needed a pathway to reach your operating system, and the pathway had to be carved through layers of self-condemnation so thick and so reinforced that the cancellation required years of internal softening before it could penetrate. Every conversation about grace you heard during those years was softening. Every moment of unexpected kindness was softening. Every time someone looked at you with the love your guilt said you did not deserve, that was me carving the pathway that the notice just traveled through. The notice arrived today, but the preparation has been happening for years, and I was beside you for every step of it. I know the exact entry on your ledger that weighs the most, my dear one, and the guarantor paid that specific line item first, not the small ones, not the manageable entries that produce guilt you can carry without buckling. The entry that sits at the center of every other entry like a gravitational core that all your other guilt orbits around. The one you cannot think about without your body physically responding. The tightening, the heat, the specific nausea that accompanies the memory of a moment you would undo if any power in the universe offered you the option. That entry was the first line item the guarantor's payment was applied to, because the guarantor knew that if the core entry was settled, every orbiting entry would lose its gravitational source. My beloved child, I know the name attached to that entry, the person you hurt, the face that appears behind your eyelids when the guilt reaches its peak intensity, the human being whose life was affected by the decision you made in the moment the click happened, the person whose pain you carry alongside your own, because your guilt does not only account for what you did to yourself, but for what you did to them. That name is in the guarantor's payment, the debt owed to that person, the spiritual and emotional obligation that your guilt has been calculating against that specific name was included in the settlement, not as an afterthought, as a primary entry. I know you do not believe you can be forgiven for what you did to them. I know the guilt that involves another person's pain feels categorically different from guilt that only affected you. And you are right that it is different. But different does not mean unincluded. The guarantor's payment covered debts owed to God and debts owed to others, because a guarantor operating at his level settles the full account rather than selected portions. The name you carry is covered. The debt attached to it is zero, and the God who knows both your pain and theirs is working on both sides of the ledger simultaneously. Type that name if God just identified the specific person your guilt revolves around, the one whose pain you carry alongside your own. And you are beginning to believe that the guarantor's payment covered what you owed them too. Now that the cancellation notice has reached your operating system, there is one thing I need you to do, my beloved child, and it is the hardest instruction a forgiven debtor ever receives. Forgive yourself, not in the way you have attempted before, the intellectual pardon that your theology grants but your operating system ignores. Not the surface-level self-forgiveness that lasts an afternoon before the ledger reopens itself the following morning with the same entries displayed in the same damning order. Real forgiveness, the kind that reaches the depth where the guilt actually lives and revokes its permission to remain. The guarantor's payment gave you the legal right to forgive yourself. Now you must exercise it. I know why this is the hardest instruction. Forgiving yourself feels like excusing what you did. It feels like minimizing the weight of the entry. It feels like telling the person you hurt that what happened was acceptable. And your sense of justice, the deeply moral part of you that recognizes the gravity of your choices, cannot tolerate the idea of letting yourself off a hook that the weight of what you did legitimately placed you on. But self-forgiveness is not letting yourself off the hook, my child. It is acknowledging that someone else took the hook. The hook was real. The debt was real. The weight was real. And the guarantor absorbed all of it, not so that the hook would be minimized, but so that the person hanging on it could be removed. You were never supposed to carry the punishment permanently. You were supposed to carry it long enough to understand its weight, and then release it to the one who volunteered to bear it in your place. You have understood the weight. For years you have understood it. The understanding served its purpose. Now the understanding must be replaced by release. Speak it today, out loud, in the privacy of whatever room holds your most honest conversations with yourself. Say the words, I forgive myself, not because what I did was small, because what was paid was enough. Say it until your operating system believes it, and then never reopen the ledger again. You made it to the moment of cancellation, my beloved child, and I need you to stand in the stillness of a zero balance long enough to feel what it actually means to owe nothing. Not the theological concept of owing nothing, the felt experience, the physical, chest-level, operating system deep experience of a person whose ledger has been stamped paid in full after years of bracing for collectors, who were dismissed before they ever reached the door. Feel the stillness. It is not emptiness. It is settlement. I want to thank you for something that your guilt made almost impossible to receive as a compliment. Thank you for carrying the weight honestly. You did not pretend the debt was not real. You did not manufacture a cheap grace that dismissed the gravity of what you did. You carried the full weight of your choices with an honesty that most people avoid, because honesty of that depth is agonizing, and the agony you endured was never punishment. It was the integrity of a person whose moral compass was always pointing toward truth. Even when truth hurt more than denial, your honesty about the debt was never your enemy. It was the very thing that prepared you to receive the cancellation at the depth it was always meant to reach. My dear child, let the tears come if they are forming. Not guilt tears, not shame tears, the specific, rare, almost sacred tears of someone who has been carrying a weight for so long that the removal of it produces a grief of its own, the grief of realizing how much of their life was spent paying for something that was already settled. How many mornings were braced against collectors who were already gone? How many blessings were deflected by a barrier that had no legal right to exist? The grief is real, and it is permitted. Grieve the carrying, and then let the carrying end. The guarantor who paid your debt is sitting beside you right now, not across from you at a judge's desk. Beside you, where he has been the entire time you were carrying what he already settled. And the look on his face is not "I told you so." It is "I am so glad you finally know." Type "finally free" if tears are falling right now that are different from any tears you have cried before. Not guilt tears, but freedom tears. The tears of someone who just discovered they have been carrying a debt that was paid before the carrying ever began. You are not the person who owes anymore, my beloved child. That identity, the one who woke up bracing, who deflected blessings, who sabotaged good things, who carried a private ledger so heavy it bent the posture of their soul, who believed that every difficulty was a collector, arriving for a payment that had already been made by someone they did not know, had stepped into their place. That identity was cancelled alongside the debt, because an identity built on an active obligation cannot survive the discovery that the obligation was settled before the identity was ever constructed. The guilt built you a prison identity. The guarantor just handed you your real one. You are not a debtor. You are a freed person whose account reads 0. Not because the debt was small, because the payment was large. Not because what you did was excused. Because what was paid exceeded what was owed by a margin so vast that the accounting system could not process the overpayment and simply stamped the entire account closed. My dear child, closed accounts do not reopen. The guarantor's payment carries a permanence that your guilt does not possess.